clever enough to show whoever it was how to do Sephardi cooking.
So you had a cook doing Sephardi food.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
did you eat Sephardi food almost entirely?
yes.
I mean, none of this roast beef and Yorkshire pudding.
Yes, we did on Sunday. I can tell you exactly what we had through the week. Do you want me to tell you?
My job was created as part of a big redevelopment project that the museum was going through, where they wanted to become a space that was more creative in its thinking, and they wanted to engage with artists to kind of activate our archives. We've got a lot of archive that is never going to be on display because we're a really small museum, and we've got thousands of objects that don't get their fair share. And actually working with artists over the last 3 years now has been a real journey into the depths of the archive and a way to kind of activate those stories for our audiences.
My name's Leo Burtin, and for the last few years I've taken to calling myself a theatre chef. And what I mean by this is, if you think about the job of a chef in a restaurant, it's to make food that's delicious, nutritious for their patrons. A chef on TV will generally focus on making things look really good for the camera. What I'm really interested in as a theatre chef is the stories that you can tell together with food. And I've had a brilliant opportunity to explore what that role means with Manchester Jewish Museum as a food artist in residence for just over 2 years now.
And I think to have a space that is devoted within a museum to the celebration of food and culture is quite exciting, and Leo's been a massive part of that journey for us, understanding how we can take Jewish food culture and make it exciting and relevant to different people from different backgrounds and different communities.
And what I've done over the course of my time here at Manchester Jewish Museum is to develop a project called Eat the Archives, which, as the title suggests, is a project that brings together the museum's collection and the stories that are held within it with food and stories. What Eat the Archives is, it's existed in a few configurations now, the project. Generally what it is, it's a dinner party. It's a dinner party where I turn up to someone's home with some food that I've prepared in advance, and I turn up with my colleague Laura from Manchester Jewish Museum, and we bring a series of artifacts and documents from the museum and tell the stories behind the people and the objects that make up the menu that we've created for the guests. And as the evening unfolds, we serve and eat the food that is connected to each of the stories.
So we knew that we wanted to have a strand of our programming that focused very much on food, because we knew that brought people together from different backgrounds. We knew it facilitated people being able to have quite complex or difficult conversations sometimes about identity. And so we started working with Leo. We were really privileged that we had a year's worth of scratch with Leo at that point. So it was at the right point in our development project. And so it meant that Leo and I got to rock around the local area to the museum, got to go into people's houses, got to go to community gardens, to community centres, and try out different kinds of meals, different kinds of ways of instigating conversation over meals, different stories from the archives. And that was a real privilege. And after that, we did a kind of mass evaluation of what we'd learned. And then Eat the Archives came about from that, where this year we've been very much more focused on particular stories that we wanted to highlight in the collection.
What really interests me in doing this is to offer people an opportunity to interact with the museum's collection in a way that is a little bit unusual. You're interacting with it with all of your senses, but primarily taste and smell, which is not a usual museum experience. And I'm also really interested in the conversations that people have around the table, how the stories that are held within the collection which are themed around ideas of journeys, ideas of communities, and ideas of identities, might prompt us to have the kinds of dinner party conversations that are maybe just a little bit out of the ordinary. So it's an invitation to have a dinner party with a slight difference.
So my role as visual dramaturg on the project involves thinking about the way things look, I guess, the way things enter the space, the way things exit the space. And when I say space, I'm talking about the tabletop as a performance space. But also like around that as well, like so if Leo goes into somebody's house, what should he be wearing that makes people feel comfortable? Yeah, it's that kind of thing, I guess. It's thinking about all the visuals around the work and what they're communicating.
We have an amazing learning kitchen, which is obviously Leo's been part of shaping, which means that people can come and cook here in the museum. Food is massively important to us as a museum of Jewish culture. All cultures have food at their centre, really, and food for us is all about bringing people together, breaking down those boundaries. And so the learning kitchen means we can get people in the building cooking and eating together and kind of celebrating all of our differences together through food.
To both document and test the project, I've invited a number of people who have met over the course of my residency here at Manchester Jewish Museum, who have been involved with various aspects of exploring this idea around eating and archives, and I've invited them to a special dinner party, a special edition of Eat the Archives. I'll be serving up the Identities menu and I'll be telling the stories behind this menu over a 3-course meal that we'll share with my very special guests.
So the way me and Leo have been working together is, I would say, obviously he knows what's going to happen in the work and I'm just sort of supporting him. I'm sort of providing that extra eye around the choices that he might make around tableware or what colour serviette to choose. And that sounds like really ridiculous and on one level, but it's so important because it all communicates something to the audience member. And I think sometimes, I don't know, maybe audience don't realise that we've spent ages talking about a plate or a fork, but we have. We've thought about every single thing and what shoes he's wearing, how a photo is presented. And I think moving away a little bit from the food being necessarily part of the story, but having a story to start with and thinking about, okay, well, what could you eat to heighten that story when you're hearing it? It doesn't necessarily directly relate to that story, but there's something that means the two of them match. There's lots of people do things with food and stories that are interesting, but they're kind of separate. Here in the archives, it's been really, really kind of integrated. What guides our decisions is how, it's a number of things, like what will make people feel comfortable, what will make people feel pleased to be in the space so that they're happy to share their stories and they're able to absorb all the information and stories that Leo is sharing with them. So people also have like a really enjoyable time whilst also thinking very carefully about these particular stories and what they might mean around identity or any of the other menus that Leo's devised work around.
Where you're sitting.
I'm sitting over there.
Great, please take a seat. Can I offer you a drink? I've got either some water or I've got this little booze-free cocktail that I made with anise, lemon and some sparkling water.
I think the cocktail sounds absolutely fabulous.
Lovely. Let's see how much fizz there is in that. Brown.
Thank you.
Katie, hello. How are you?
Really well.
Nice to see you. You were the last person I saw before the world
Really?
ended,
Oh my
basically. You're
goodness.
one of the few people that I saw. This is Sarah. I don't know if you've
Hi,
met
Katie.
before.
I think I haven't met most people.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have. Cheers, Katie. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Hi, Shauna. How are you? Good. You'll be sitting right next to me all the way here at the top. How did you get here today?
Drove actually. I live in South Manchester, so it wasn't very far. Okay, it was very busy actually. It's amazingly
I've
busy
noticed
from
that.
when
Roads are
we
definitely
came in through
busier than they
lockdown.
were. And this is Sarah and Katie. I don't know
Hi
if you-
Sarah, Katie.
Hi. Yeah, I know from Shaw.
We do, we know each other from school and I've just met Sarah today. She's lovely.
It's nice to
She is, Lion.
I know, right? It's a dinner party, imagine.
Hi lad.
Hello there.
How are you?
Very good.
I think you're next to Katie.
I love like a herbs and like spices.
Thank you.
So different from the summer.
Okay.
Like a dill is to die for.
Hello Phyllis. How are you?
It's lovely to see you.
Good to see you. Here's your plate.
No, I think it's delicious. Cheers.
Great. And then we're just
More
waiting
time.
on, Laura. I think she's on her way. I'll serve myself this. Hello Laura.
Hi Laura.
How you doing? Come and join everyone. Very fetching apron.
Thank you.
Oh, brands.
Would you like some water or would you like some of my cocktail thing?
a cocktail, please.
You're wearing much outfit.
Look at that. It's almost as though we've planned it.
Leo, can you tell me the ingredients again?
Yeah.
The smell is gorgeous.
It's star anise that I turned into a syrup. Which is a very simple syrup with sugar and water, and then lemon and sparkling water.
It's delicious, absolutely lovely. Yeah.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Nice to see you.
Sláinte.
Any others?
Yes. Stoyamas.
Stoyamas?
Yamas.
What would you say for cheers?
No, syrup. No.
I feel like that should be vodka though.
Oh, you'd like to come to the table.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for hosting us.
And welcome to Eat the Archives. So what will happen over the course of our lunch together is I will share with you some stories which are connected to objects and artifacts from the museum's collection and serve you a dish for each story that's
Linking together.
There you go, that makes sense to the food. And sometimes the food is very directly connected to the story, sometimes it's about where the person who the story is about has come from and the connection to that. So I'll tell you a little bit about each dish as well as we go through. But before we start, you'll know that, or you'll notice that I made these little placeholders, and what I'd just like you to do is to just turn them so that you know who you are, but that way you don't have to necessarily remember everybody's names. And the first story I have is about this woman, Dora Black.
Yes.
Exactly. And the museum calls her diary a black book, which I'm about to tell you a little bit more about. So Dora will come here, and Dora gets a name tag too.
Oh, that's lovely. Nice picture.
Mrs. Noah, 17 Quayer Street, August 31st, 1913, one boy. Mrs. Newman, 21 Jew Street, which is not on this map, it's too far away.
Right.
March 24th, 1914, one girl. Mrs. Cohen, 7 Tenerife Street, February 1st, 1915, one girl. and 1 boy. Mrs. Cohen, 22 York Buildings, on York Avenue, March 19th, 1916, still born.
Oh.
The Greek root of the word archive refers to the archon's house, the patriarch, the head of state, or the ruler. And by extension, the architecture of a social memory which demands visible or materially traceable remains in the architecture of a particular social power over memory. This is a quote from Rebecca Schneider. And in Nurse Dora Black's Little Black Book is the possibility of another kind of memory, light marks in pencil as much as ink. The initial sketch for the start of a life, away from official records, an additional note for oneself unlikely to have been intended for the posterity of a museum's protection. And this is perhaps what moves me most about Dora Black's book. Over 100 years after each of those entries were made, the complete memory of each birth, the joy or the sorrow held between the walls of each of these addresses, remains only with those who've been there. I like to imagine that for Dora Black, the act of noting was about committing each child to her own memory. I wonder if you might find yourself sometimes remembering the things that you took the time to note down, only to forget the things that you thought you wouldn't need to write down. There's only one small mystery that remains, which is that Dora's son, Lou, remembers that his mother was not able to write, which would have meant that she would have had to rely on a companion to complete each entry. And we can't know for sure whether each birth was recorded by Dora herself. The possibility of another hand involved in this story reveals that once again, each object we'll share with you today tells as much about its negative space, the space around and between the subject of an image, as what it says about the object itself. Dora Black's years of service to Jewish families in and around Cheetham earned Dora Black the title of Nurse Black, despite never being officially registered as a nurse or as a midwife. Arriving to Manchester from her native Romania, Dora herself gave birth to 7 children, 4 of whom were born in Romania in the late 1800s. And when Dora first arrived in Manchester, she'd work alongside her husband, Solomon Schwartz, a tailor, to make trousers. And Solomon was a very slow and methodical worker, so he would never be the main breadwinner in the family. And so in addition to her work as a midwife, Dora would teach new mothers how to look after babies for a fee. And her fees and the tips which new mothers would give her would be thrown into the bathwater, and that would earn the family enough to be one of the first in Cheetham to have electricity installed. So I'm going to go into the kitchen and prepare our starter, which is a dish called balls, and they're little balls made out of polenta stuffed with cheese. Yes. And as well as this recipe being adapted from various recipes from Romania, I thought it would go quite well with Nurse Dora Black, because she might have had to run out of the door to attend births and to look after families, and so they're really a finger food. So although there's cutlery on the table, my recommendation is just tuck in with your fingers. I'll get those ready for you. So to make it, the first thing that we need to do is to cook the polenta. So I have here 600 ml of vegetable stock. You could use any kind of stock you like. And to make it richer, I also have the same amount of milk. Now this is cow's milk, but you could use plant-based drink if you wanted to, or any other kind of milk would work. Or if you're avoiding dairy for whatever reason, you can also use double the amount of stock. But I could tell you that this recipe was originally made a lot by shepherds in Romania and other parts of Eastern Europe, because it was an easy food to kind of have on the go. And although we'll bake it in the oven today, you could cook it on a fire as well. So once your milk and stock has come to a boil, give it a good old whisk, and then take it right off the heat. And then very gently, while still stirring, you want to pour in the polenta. My grandmother used to call this technique of pouring the polenta en pluie, as if it's raining. And it's kind of what you want to do to not create any clumps. And what you're looking for here really as a consistency is that it comes off the edges and the bottom of the pot. And once you've got to that point, you want to turn your hob off completely and let it cool. And we're now going to let this sit until it's a little bit cooler so that you can handle it with your hands, but you don't want it so cool that you can't manipulate it anymore, because what we are going to do is form it into little balls. So while we wait for it to cool, what you can do is prepare some cheese, which is something I've done earlier. Here I have about 200 grams of a German smoked cheese. Now obviously, this being a shepherd's dish, it would often have been made with sheep's milk instead. You can use any firm cheese, so Emmental works well. Another one that I like a lot is a cheese from the Pyrenees called Osorati, but this smoked cheese will give us that kind of fire flavour. While you're waiting for your polenta to cool, what you can do as well is get a baking tray ready with some parchment paper on top to have your balls ready to go. Okay, so I think I can probably handle this now. So what you want to do for this stage is take some olive oil, and you want to basically wash your hands with it a little bit so that you can form your cheese balls. Really good hydration too. And then you want to take about a tablespoon, form it into a little ball, like so. And then with your thumb, create a little gap here. Place a square of cheese, a little cube of cheese, or you can grate it too, and close it up and reshape it into a bowl. And pop it on your baking tray. The proportions I gave you are good for about 12 to 16 of those balls, but you can obviously adjust the quantity depending on what you're intending to serve them with, or how many people you're feeding. Okay, so for the next part of this recipe, really easy, some more olive oil into a little dish or plate. Get your pastry brush out. And give them a little bit of a brush. You could use an egg wash if you wanted to for this, that would work okay. And you could sprinkle a little bit of extra cheese on top as well, if that's what you wanted to do. In the oven they go, and we'll see them again in half an hour. gum.
Not Yom Kippur, at the end of Yom Kippur.
Yes. Yeah.
It's blown by a man who's been trained and has done it all his life. But it's luck of the draw sometimes
Yeah.
as to whether or not he can do it on the day. And everyone is standing there, hoping
Hungry.
he'll be fine. And then is it
Find the puff.
is it Shakoa? You say at the end.
Yeah,
Shikoya.
Shikoya.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That looks lovely.
Oh, it looks beautiful. Delicious.
Oh, one day I'll successfully put a sugar bar.
Have I?
Perfectly full.
Oh, they look amazing.
Lab, remind me.
I like rolling
Slovakia.
things. I like rolling food in my hands.
So I remember your dish was like paprika.
Meatballs and stuff.
And I was like, it's like paprika. In your mushroom
There's
dip.
something quite
Yeah,
soothing
but,
about it, isn't
so
there? Thank you.
It's gorgeous.
we used the part where I'm from used to be Hungary,
Okay.
so hence the influence of the paprika, which the
Mm.
Turks brought in during the reign.
You put paprika, smoked paprika in the mushroom dish that we
It
had.
was just plain sweet and
It was delicious, and I started to use smoked paprika quite a lot. I go through phases of different spices, herbs that I want to use, and at the moment it even goes in baked beans.
But
Oh,
do you
I
find
did last season.
Sei gesund.
Like I've like
Bon
a
appetit, everyone.
Oh,
Yeah, because I'll
shall we
do
go
it.
around the table like we did for the drinks? And in Greek they say kaliorexia.
Kaliorexia.
Who else is adding? What did they say in Ireland?
no.
Get on with it.
Eat your grub.
And the drink for you say maltzai. Just like
Yeah, but we might use my fork actually.
Now, fingers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with fingers. So
I'm a fork
balls
girl.
with rubber sauce, the door back.
You said you used
Good old
cheese.
Dora back with her
It's a Bavarian smoked
skillful
cheese.
hands.
Mm.
She really was the
Gorgeous
family
Leo.
breadwinner. She made,
She does.
she kept them all together.
And those, yeah, I've taken a bit of liberty really with the sauce, which is really salsa brava is what you would have in Spanish cuisine with potatoes. But I thought since meeting Lad and cooking with paprika from generally Eastern Europe, I thought paprika will go nicely.
It's not too overpowering.
Did you bake these in the bake them in the
And I baked
Yeah,
them in the oven
baked
for
it,
about half an hour,
Yeah, it's very nice.
and cheated with the smoked paprika and the smoked cheese to pretend like I've been making them in the fire like a shepherd.
Anyone who I've like, anyone who I didn't hang out with before everything. I just talking about the museum is one of these things. It's like, yeah, like I never talk about how awesome the museum is. Like,
It's amazing how many people I talk to who are like, I've driven past it, but I've never been in.
Yeah.
All the time I get kind of,
I leave with the food stuff a lot now. I'm like, let me tell you some stuff. Yeah. I really love
I
it.
think for most Manchester children, we've had a school trip here. School trip,
Yeah, definitely.
Didn't Aaron come here on a school trip? He said when he was,
when he was 11 or something.
Did you?
Oh, wow.
Did you?
Yeah.
I love it.
Shauna, you were a midwife, weren't you?
I was in a formal way,
Would you have taken this food on the go to attend births?
No,
In case you wouldn't have
it was a different kind of lifestyle. I was mainly hospital based anyway, so took a little snack for whenever we could eat it. That's about it, really.
Which hospital were you at?
Well, I worked in South Manchester at Withington Hospital, and then they rationalised the services to Withenshaw, so I worked between the two, yeah. Which I now think Withenshaw is part of the St Mary's group.
Yeah, I'm going through the short yeah.
Have you thought of incorporating the ingredients from the sauce into the middle bit?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good idea. I think the way to do that, Yeah, because actually the sauce is thickened with flour, so it does congeal, so you could put it in the middle without...
Virgin.
Or paprika cheese.
That's really good,
I
yeah.
think it's nice.
Yeah, really nice idea.
I've never had them before, I've got to say. Is it first? Is it first for you? Have you had this before?
Yeah, never had it before.
No.
I actually have a lot of polenta sitting around my house that needs using, so.
Oh, there you go.
It's the first for me for polenta.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've always dodged it. I was convinced I wouldn't like it. I was wrong.
Oh, that's always good. That's
I
always,
use it as a substitute for potato with stews and things, just for ring the changes really, of the carbohydrate.
yes. And you can make it a little bit like mash or...
Or you can like have it like solid.
Yes.
Oh man, like
really.
I mean, the reason I had chips polenta is I was having it so all the time, and it was so Moorish. It was like, like dripping with like fat and cheese. Really great. Come over to my house and make really great polenta. Yeah.
So as you finish your dishes, I'm going to get set up and ready for us to step ahead a little bit, and I'm going to get you to prepare our dessert, which are some sweet burekas. Don't worry, you don't have too much to do. I've made the filling already, so all you'll have to do is a little bit of forming. So I'm going to cut some phyllo pastry, give you a little board with the phyllo pastry and the filling, and then I'll show you how I fold them. Now there are many ways to fold burekas, and you might have an alternative plan, which I'd love to hear about. And you'll hear the story of the burekas, not just yet, but when we eat them. So, to make our sweet burekas, we'll need about 350 milliliters of a very strong tea. So I've steeped this for about 10 minutes with 2 tea bags. So into our tea we're going in with dried apricots, about 100 grams, and 150 grams of cherries. And we're just going to let them simmer for about 20 minutes. So once your fruit has steamed and there's only just a little bit of tea left at the end, what you want to do is blend it to a puree. Then you'll want to add the almond flour, ground almonds, your chopped hazelnuts, a couple of heaped tablespoons of brown sugar, start mixing this through a little bit. And then about half a teaspoon of cinnamon. As you can see, it's quite a dry mix, but it will sort of steam up in the oven once it goes into the phyllo pastry, which I've got here hiding under the tea towel. There you go. And once it's come together, taste it and see how you get on. And if it needs a little bit more sweetener, go in with about a tablespoon of agave syrup. You could use another kind of liquid sweetener if you wanted, like a date syrup, for example. And give it a good mix. Now, once this is done, what you want to do is uncover your phyllo pastry. have a tray ready with some parchment paper. And then on each of your phyllo strips, starting at the bottom, you'll want a portion of the filling, and then you can flag fold it into a triangle like so. And again, all the way up. And repeat. It's been a bit of a theme today of food that involves getting your hands dirty to make it. Once your burekas have been folded, you want to brush them lightly with coconut oil. So I've just melted a little bit of coconut oil, and this is what I'm going to use to brush them. You could use another kind of oil. I quite like the flavour of coconut oil. If you melt it in a saucepan as well, it toasts very slightly, which I really like. And once you've brushed them with oil, a dusting of icing sugar. And then they go into an oven that has been preheated to 180 Celsius for about 15 to 20 minutes. Out come our burekas. Let them cool slightly before you serve them, and you can have them with whatever you like. Some ice cream would be really nice, and what I'll be serving with them tomorrow is a nice red fruit coulis. So I'm going to put you to work slightly, and you're going to make our dessert burekas. Yeah. So what you've got on your board is you have 2 sheets of phyllo pastry, which is cut to size. And you've got the filling, which is dried cherries, dried apricots, almonds, and chopped hazelnuts. And all you have to do is take a little bit of the filling. You can use your teaspoon or your fingers. You won't need to do anything else with the teaspoon. And then all you do is you put it in a corner of your phyllo pastry. And then basically it's a flag fold. So what I do is I just bring that corner, you'll see that, and just at a right angle, look, I did it really badly just then, into a triangle. And then basically with my fingers just press the, oh, you were almost there.
That was a bit disparaging.
And then just,
I did look at his face when
it does crackle a little bit, and then just push a little bit of the filling into the corner. Don't worry too much, it expands a little bit in the oven and steams up, which is why I don't really bother with any butter or anything like that. And then basically again.
Show me it again now.
Yeah. So right, you'll take.
You've got it a lot flatter. Let me just get mine a bit flatter.
Yeah, I don't really have
and then you want to bring this corner
beautiful. That's
a bit more so that it matches up with that with
Right.
that end of
Makes it a
the
lump rock.
just take the filling right with it.
Yeah, so the next one I'm gonna do, I'm gonna like shape the filling
I think maybe there's
first.
too much filling.
Put it there, and then put that one across like
Yeah,
that.
and don't worry about it being a bit
Yeah.
funky looking because then you're going to do
Then
it
what do I
again.
do with it?
So then
Okay, so
basically,
there's not like,
so what we want,
there's not like
excuse me,
a
fingers,
finishing.
you want this to line up more
Ah,
here.
right, that's it.
And then,
Yes.
ta-da!
Some now.
And what's that?
There's cheating going on this end.
I'm very tempted.
And then basically you just fold it up until you've got this wee little triangle thing.
Yes.
That's so gorgeous, the mix is
Let's try
so
this
lovely.
And repeat with the next one.
We're gonna turn it into an actual.
Are
We're
these
gonna make a
going
bit
to
of
be
that.
fried or
but-
baked in the oven?
They're going to be baked in the oven,
So that if I just put that down.
but you could deep fry it at home.
Because I'm mixing them up with those Indian starters, aren't I?
Yeah.
That you just buy at Marks and
I get away with
Spencer's.
that because, particularly with
If you
British
want
stuff,
to
it's
make
like she's not from here, just let her do it.
using tortillas.
Oh yeah.
She's making it as she goes along.
It's just easy to go like that. into
Look at that, you're all pros at this
One
Bereka
of
folding.
the best things about the Cheetham Festival is that
Oh,
we have those
that
one-day
food they
events.
brought
The
in.
mosque suddenly arrived with a big bucket of samosas. And everyone like,
And
got
a
spell
big,
going.
and a big tray of the sheep crabs.
Oh, did they? I didn't stick around long
But
enough.
sheep kebabs,
Yeah.
they come with a big tray of those.
Mince meat on skewer with
Yeah.
spice.
Yeah.
And
I think
what's
they cook them at the mosque.
And then we're going to share this pastry brush, and this is a bit of melted coconut oil.
It's like,
And you just brush it lightly
I'm having a great
onto your...
Both sides or not?
That's up to you. I quite like just doing the top so that the bottom stays nice and soft, but if you've got a preference,
I like my cream.
you can do that. Now, Laura, if you would assist me, and if your side of the table puts their completed folded Berekas on there, and then we know more or less whose is
I
whose.
have to make something that's like pretty but edible. Well,
I'll put mine on.
like any cake ever.
I was never
think we
good
go
at
for
maths,
edible
so I
and
don't know what
pretty
a
though,
triangle looks like.
Yeah.
These are quite good.
I'm like an ugly food.
Sometimes it can be that ugly, you can't face eating it.
That's true.
Eat no matter how
Oh,
nice
yours
it
are
is.
crispy.
I'm saying it has to be really ugly to get to that point for me. But
Mine are little
not familiar with the concept.
Oh, join
They
the
look a
club.
bit like origami.
Yeah.
Swan origami.
That's so nice. You can see everyone's personality come through in their Berekas.
Is that what you used to do at the back of the class?
Very neat, Katie.
I was saying this is actually all time the representation.
Got a great little board, so you better start mostly that.
Beautiful.
Again, down to one for the photographer.
And yeah, and then your Berekas will go in the oven, and I'll get the rice dish ready. So for our main course, we'll be having spiced cabbage polo rice. So I'm going to start by preparing our vegetables. So we'll need some garlic, about 4 generous cloves, 4 big cloves of garlic, a large onion, slice your onion, no particular way, I like to halve it and then just okay, put it to one side. Garlic, similarly, peel and slice. Again, keep your garlic to one side for now. And get on with your cabbage. Now, this is a Savoy cabbage. You could use any regular cabbage. I don't recommend red cabbage because it stains the whole dish and changes its color and slightly different taste, but you could use Cavallonero, which is of the kale family. You could also use green beans if you're not so keen on cabbage. Have your head of cabbage. Take the core out. You can keep it for making stock or soup. And then just, again, finely shred it. Okay, before I get on with shredding the other side, the other half of my cabbage, generous glog of olive oil in your pan. And you can go in with your onion and garlic straight away. I purposefully put the onion and garlic in the cold oil so that it infuses their flavour into the oil a little bit, rather than cook the vegetables straight away. Once your onions have started to soften, but before they take on too much colour, you want to go in with about 1 teaspoon of pulled biber, which is a very mild chili flake. You could use a little bit less of any other chili flake if you haven't got pulled biber. A teaspoon of ground turmeric. And 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And then go in with about 4 tablespoons of tomato puree. Which you also want to let toast for a little bit. Once this is nice and fragrant, you can add your cabbage. Once your spices are nice and mixed in, you can add approximately 200 ml of water. And then just let it simmer for about 10 minutes. And while it finishes cooking, I'm going to add in some barberries and some dried apricots, which I've previously soaked in a little bit of boiling water. And then they'll be ready to be mixed into saffron infused rice and topped with flaked almonds and sea salt.
Life of its own.
Where's it gone?
That Velcro with behind it.
We're not that posh, but we're also joined by May, who was a little girl in this film.
Right.
Tell you their story. And I'll give you some food.
Absolutely, yes. So I like sitting next to me. Teachers.
And I like having you next to me. Our next story is one of balance, of duality, of neither nor, both and. Vera, for whom we don't have a picture. Vanda, for whom we don't have a picture. Esther and May are young women in the first half of the 20th century. Their families had migrated to Manchester from Syria, Greece and Bulgaria, With the exception of Esther, who arrived in England in 1920, they belong to the first generation of their kin to be born in Manchester. There's a phrase which does not really seem to have been written down, but is said to have been passed from family to family. May your children be born in Manchester. A blessing whispered among those seeking to leave their countries to find new opportunities. And for Vera, Vanda, Esther and May, it's a good omen come true. Strong from their parents' success in business, Vera, Vanda, Esther and May remember the start of their life in Manchester fondly. Life was just gay, Vanda tells us in her oral history. As their families established themselves in England, Vera, Vanda, Esther and May, like so many other migrants, both then and now, live in between. They navigate language, Ladino at home, English outside, Arabic between adults, English to the children. No hables así en frente de las criaturas. A phrase heard time and again by May. Don't speak like this in front of the children. A hint perhaps at a desire to lightly efface part of their otherness in order to make roots in their new homes. And this is also reflected in the family's menus. Roast beef and Yorkshire pudding on a Sunday, cold meat and chips on a Tuesday, hash and lentil soup on a Wednesday, until the weekend rolls around and the tavels serve rice with almonds and honey and other Sephardi foods, often elevated by the inclusion of fresh, sharp yogurt, perhaps produced by the Salem family on their dairy farm, bringing a taste of home to the southern Mediterranean Jews and playing a role in importing this food to Manchester. For the Identities, food from the Balkans is served downstairs for the adults, while in the nursery the children are given Lancashire hot pot, cottage pie and many other English dishes involving mashed potato.
Not potato.
So the dish that I'm about to serve you is partly inspired by the cuisine of Iran, partly by Sephardi jeweled rice, but like this story, like Vera, Vanda, Esther and May, I wanted to kind of bring an element of this kind of in-betweenness and bring parts of the dish back to England. So rather than serving it with green beans or other kinds of vegetables that you might have found in Iran or the Middle East, we're having it with a spiced cabbage. So that's our next dish, and it'll be a sharing dish. So what I'll do is I'll move the flowers, put it in the middle of the table, and we can serve each other and help ourselves to the quantities that we like.
Yes, but only like that size. We'll expect it to feed 8 people.
Oh,
right.
Oh no.
Didn't quite work.
The starters were nice.
Had you been talking about loads of fishes at that juncture in your
Not quite.
Here we are.
Wonderful.
Oh, goodness.
yes.
So the dish is very hot, so I'll leave this here and I'll let you decide how much you want.
I've never cooked rice in that way before. The Iranian way.
Oh, with like
where they
the
measure the
chutney on
water,
the bottom.
Yeah.
and then you bring it to the boil from cold, and then let it steam in its own heat. I've never done that till Leo sent us that recipe card. Have you done it before, Phyllis?
Is this, sorry, I didn't catch the beginning. Is this where the rice is left to be cooked?
Yeah.
Yes, I actually emailed Leo after and said that that way of doing it was the best rice I'd ever made.
It was for me as well. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just perfect.
I couldn't believe that it would do that.
And it's fluffy,
Don't
isn't
do
it?
it.
Yeah. I was amazed at it. Sorry.
Is this my favorite?
Thank you, sorry.
It was basmati.
It was what?
It
Basmati rice. No, I think it was
basmati
this dish.
Yes.
Okay, so I thought you were talking about where you do where you end up with you steam it all together and you put saffron and yogurt at the bottom.
Yes.
Ends up with
with
a tuzzy on the bottom.
But what I learned from doing that was that you steep the saffron and then just use the water to give it the
burn
colour,
my
which I
hand.
didn't realise before. I thought what Katie just said was the right way to do it.
Do you want to give
Oh,
me
thank you. Thank you, Phyllis.
That's all right. Just leave it to
Leo, are these
Yes.
barberries?
Yes, they are barberries, and there are more,
Yeah.
and there are more on the table for a little taste
Oh my
of,
god, I would actually love that.
Iran.
Fantastic.
And that's pul biber, which is a chili flake and a latte flake.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
I feel like it's all peppers. It's so
Oh,
bright and sour and like. Oh god, I love Korean food. I'm like, I have infinite time for Iranian food. Like.
Thank you very much for
Maybe it
this.
was a bit
Oh,
bad
thank you, love.
when I made mine. Let's taste it.
Some spice. It's very pretty.
See, it's the only thing that keeps us quiet.
Yeah.
No.
And even then.
Like I had this whole time, I was like, oh, we're gonna be out of town.
Yeah.
The flavouring right.
I understand that
Good.
everyone is Jewish, but like broadly speaking, it's like get a bunch of like Jewish people around food.
Ah,
I was like, we're all gonna talk over each other. Yeah, that's good for
yeah,
food.
if that happens again, you can add a little bit of water.
Yeah. This is the one.
Cooperative
This is the
overlapping is like.
Pul biber, the little chili flakes.
But interestingly enough, I'd never cooked Savoy cabbage before because I didn't really like it.
Mm.
I like other cabbage.
You could use any other cabbage with this. The
But
only
no,
one
I
I
followed
think is
the
not so
recipe to the
great is
letter,
that.
absolutely to the letter.
Excellent. You're a good client.
I feel like I've never met a cabbage that I didn't like. Ever.
Yeah.
Like if there was any doubt that I was German, like just not a thing. Like I just love a
Got pictures of
cabbage.
little cabbages walking down the street like you're meeting cabbages.
Oh yeah.
Hi, absolutely.
It's extremely little. This is like the first year that I make sauerkraut in a really long
So the
time.
grown-ups would be having this and the little ones would be having that.
Yeah. Although the grown-ups probably would be having it with green beans rather than cabbage or those kinds of vegetables. If they were eating meat, they might have had ground beef. And they would have had what Katie was talking about just a little bit earlier, which is tadig, which is when you leave the rice and the whole dish to cook in a really heavy bottom pot, so that creates a crispy bottom.
I like that.
Which is really, really
In
nice.
fact, I did use a heavy bottom pan in the hope that you could
And you
do
could
that.
make this with a crispy tadig. Feels a bit too high pressure for me.
Oh yeah, no, because you never know. God.
Because you never know how it's going to come out until it comes out, and it could be very
I
bad.
love to burn a tadig.
Yeah.
And by love, slaughtered meat, it happens all the time.
When I had this at the weekend, we had it with yogurt on the side.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because I think it was a little bit more spicy. And actually Esther, her family, when the textile trade kind of fell apart a little bit in the 30s, when there was a crash, the economic crash, they set up a farm in South Manchester and they started to produce yogurt because there were a lot of Mediterranean people living in Didsbury and they missed yogurt. She says that they were the first people to bring yogurt to Manchester.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
We'll believe them, we'll believe
yeah,
them.
but actually a little bit of yogurt with this dish reminds me of Esther.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what was sad was when you mentioned that they spoke only, did you say English to the children, sort of the children? It's a pity in some families they didn't maintain all the English and at home in Ireland when my Irish Jewish parents spoke Yiddish because their parents were Orthodox Jews from Russia.
Yeah.
They were gabbling away in Yiddish right up until my brother and I could understand what they were saying. One of the phrases was, "Never put away the sweets." As we walk into the room, never let the zizzer. And we then we started to say, no, don't, you see. And then they stopped. They stopped. And I don't understand Yiddish. I have phrases. But I could be able to speak it if they had maintained. I don't know why they didn't maintain it. It's a shame.
It's really common. It's one of those things that's like, so common in here in the United States as well. Just like languages, for the sake of, because of course, part of me is heartbroken that like even the languages in my family just like disappeared.
Did you believe the
But you understand on some level.
I know, I've got
You come to a place and you're like, I want my kids' life to be easy. You know, I have friends, parents, from like South America who don't speak Spanish. Because they wouldn't, because they just thought, it's easier. It's easier. We came to the States, we're just going to speak English. There's no reason not to. The family's not here.
But your daughter, lad,
and he
you're going to bring her up bilingual.
He found it.
Three or trilingual.
Yes.
Yes,
he did.
I already don't know that
I feel like more languages you are teaching the child simultaneously, you would think that it will take much longer for her to figure out what is that one object. This is spoon, and Lijica is the same thing as spoon, and canal is the same thing as the spoon. But eventually, I think if this is the time for their capacity to be so broad that they can pick it up, it makes it more difficult for the parents.
They don't know they're learning 3 languages. They don't know. And
But
that's
what a
why it's
fantastic
so
skill.
important.
If she grows up
Absolutely.
trilingual, how amazing.
Yeah, and hopefully she will speak to us in a language that we understand.
Yeah, that's true.
You might find
She could just
that you
decide,
ask-
no, Mandarin is the language.
Yeah.
You might find that you ask her something and she answers in the another language.
That's what my nephew
I
does.
think that's incredible because she's understood what you've said, but to tease you, she's coming out the answer in another
So
language.
it forces the parents as well to learn the language of the other partner.
Yes.
Otherwise they don't listen to child's
What
language.
does your wife speak?
Urdu.
Urdu.
Oh,
It's
right.
very different. Yeah.
And I'm used to speaking English all the time, maybe more than Slovak or Hungarian, but I need to consciously make that conscious choice to speak to her in those languages, otherwise I miss that train.
Yeah, maybe it's the storytelling, the bedtime stories
Yeah,
in Slovak or something.
And probably get myself equipped with like Slovak fairy tale books or something that is of that country.
Yeah. What a combination though, Urdu and Slovak and English.
That's so great. That's
Diplomatic corps.
Yeah, been ambassadors.
Already got her a job.
Katie's yeah, it's a good way to be.
So how many languages do you have in your mix, Katie? Quite a few.
So I mean, it's a complicated question because I have these languages that I learned kind of as I went, but I think people think, oh, like fluency in the language, you like know the whole language. But for me, so I grew up, this is the 13th country I've lived in, so I've always moved like, from birth. And like, I know enough to communicate, which for me is actually a lot less than other people, because I tend to be quite confident, so I'll just bark up to somebody and I'll take the language that I know, and we just sort of work it out, and I describe something. If I don't have the word, they give me the word, and it sort of works. So, which is to say, don't think that I'm like fluent in any way that you think, but I have Spanish very well, because I learned it very young.
Wow.
I have Portuguese very well, because of the same reason, because I learned it when I was 13 to make friends with the cool girls. Really, really good motivation. I have just my Arabic is gone, which is really heartbreaking. But I have pretty decent Arabic. And it turns out I have a lot more German than I thought.
Do you have a bit of Swedish? Is your mother Swedish, did you say?
Yeah. I mean, that's the language that's like completely gone.
Oh, right.
Right, so like, yeah, my there was, her grandmother just like only spoke Swedish. And they just disappeared. Just, everyone spoke English. It was just like assimilate really quickly. Which is, I think kind of sad. She doesn't have this like connection. I think she's like developed a connection more recently, wanting to be connected to it. But it makes sense, They came all this way and like, it didn't help anyone to speak Swedish. Like,
It's not one of the most spoken languages as well, is it?
Exactly. So, but yeah.
I'm fine.
My passion is how to live, for me, the gospel today. And how it speaks to me, and especially in an area like Cheetham Hill, which has obviously got the Jewish background, and we've got a lot of South Asian people in there as well.
Eastern European from,
exactly,
everybody really, haven't we?
And it's always been like the United Nations on your doorstep.
Yes,
hasn't
it is.
really?
Did somebody say about 24 languages spoken at
Abraham Most is 66, or the last count was 66 different languages spoken at Abraham Most, and that goes from reception right up to the end of high school. And in Tutor Academy that I'm part of,
Were you saying you like to live your life as close to the Gospels as possible? Yeah.
And how Scripture today affects how I live my life in an area like this, and what it means today.
Right, so there's the New Testament, that's the priority of...
The Gospels in particular, the priority, but you can't have the Gospels without the Old Testament, and you can't have the New Testament.
I want to ask you a question, because I think there wasn't an Old Testament ever. There was the Bible. And then when the New Testament came, that created people referring to the Bible as the Old, to differentiate. But I try to, I say the Old Testament, but I try to say the Bible because that's actually more accurate.
And actually, I think probably I'm being quite politically incorrect by calling it the Old Testament.
Yeah, but I can understand why.
Because nowadays, a lot of Christians would refer it as the Jewish Bible, and then the Gospels, and then the New Testament.
I'm interested.
I might just call it the Pentateuch, actually.
Oh gosh, yeah, I wouldn't even.
So it's 5 books.
I call it Torah. Here's the
Torah,
sort of thing that I come
Torah.
probably with the privilege of like a lot of my families, because my family's all mixed.
Yeah.
And so I sort of go with the words. I try not to be, like earlier not explaining shofar, I felt kind of bad about it. It was really silly. I should know better, because even among other Jewish people I try to do that. But like saying like Torah, like I just go all in, and I go in on like Yiddish as well, like with my friends who don't know Yiddish. Because one of the things within Jewish spaces, I'm very, very different. I almost make more of an effort, and particularly in this age of the internet, because you put it in text, and someone can literally just Google it or ask me. If I'm with other Jews, I'll often be like, I'll clarify things because I want people to make sure, because there's so much like gap in like what people know and what people learn. But when I'm outside of the Jewish space, I'll just go in and I'll use the Yiddish word, and if someone's like, what's that word? I'm like, oh yeah, like chutzpah, you know, like audacity in Yiddish or whatever, Torah, you know, I'll just say it. I'll say keeper, couple, and they'll be like, what? I'll usually go like that. And just like where they're going to say
I love that
like
it came with the gesture
yeah.
too.
Because it's like you can learn. It sounds really like within, you know, within reason. It's like, yeah, you can learn that. And I would hope that like my Muslim friends and stuff to some extent, like, yeah, it's probably bad. It's probably bad.
In the English of America,
you
find a lot of Yiddish words just so
Americans
assimilated that there isn't an alternative any longer. You know,
Well, it's like
true.
I know what
Yeah. That's how I want to learn about other people's cultures, frankly. I want them to feel safe to use it around me.
And I think it's important that we build up the trust where we can ask without being sarcastic, because it is a genuine wanting to know about somebody else's culture.
And by recognising that people will have come from different, even within any given culture. So having grown up in a mixed family, but also in France, actually, there are some words, even that are used in English to do with Judaism that I might not use, or to do with any religion, because it's a different, because we might use a different word. And so bearing that in mind as well, that there's not one way to be any given culture or background or anything like that, but there's like such a...
Yeah, and I understand in school when children are learning, this is what Christians believe, this is what Jewish people believe, this is what Muslims believe, but then, and I get when you're kind of 8, 9, you've not necessarily got the time to expound on that, but actually there's so much more to it.
Oh yes, even
and there's so much in between that.
If we spoke on the subject all day for a week, there would be more to say than we had already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I find is quite interesting though is that when the schools come here to the museum, the schools that have quite a high percentage of kids who are observant, you know, Muslims or Christians, they get the fact that Judaism could be quite different for different people, and but if you have a bigger bulk of non-religious, secular children,
it's harder for them.
It's harder, so they don't get the concept so much of what it is to be
I have so much more common with like observant Muslim friends, for example, because we can just like. Yeah, we can just sort of there's an understanding of like law, the idea of like religious law being a thing and like your relationship to it. Because I think someone who's not religious is like law, like any given person or any person who's like married and wearing like hijab like would necessarily like be obligated to everything, or someone who's like wearing a myriad would be obligated to everything. Like that's that's the thing, and then that's where I think, well, I guess maybe I am. But I'm not religious. Okay, I'm religious. Like, I go to a place, I go to my synagogue. I'm very obnoxiously Jewish. It's very hard to miss.
Okay, it's time for dessert. The barekas you made are ready. I'm going to take Esther and May, and they'll join Dora in the kitchen. And we'll be joined instead by Annie Conway.
She sounds like she's Irish to me. Might be naughty guess.
It's pretty good guess.
Who's that?
Annie Conway.
Oh, yes.
I think she's Irish.
She is indeed.
Maybe.
Is she?
It says her name here for Annie. For the desserts for her.
Yeah, but why do you think she's Irish?
I don't know. The name makes me think of it.
Annie Conway. I don't know. Protestant then, because I'm Catholic, mate.
All right. Okay.
So again, we won't be polite, this will be a finger dessert.
Oh, goody.
She don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe this was the left side of the room. Which ones did you think were yours, Phyllis?
Those two.
Ta-da.
They were slightly deprived of stuff.
Pardon?
They were deprived of some stuff, I believe.
Well, now I feel
Why, what
like
happened? Did it fall on the floor?
Wait.
I didn't know I was going to have to identify mine. You're in a really good position for identification. It's not very generic.
I paid you to be quiet, but
I can't read someone else.
What about you, lad? What do you think?
This and anything that's not triangular.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because I'm
Right.
going to be wrong for sure.
Thank you.
100%.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you.
And by process of elimination,
I think you don't see me.
I think they were a lot more like Laura's perfect ones than mine.
so let me tell you their story.
you want to pass that around?
Yeah.
You start.
Yeah. These delicate triangles of thin phyllo pastry are called burekas. They are a very popular food in Sephardi Jewish cuisine and also throughout the Mediterranean, from Greece to Morocco. They can be made in a diversity of shapes and with a diversity of doughs and filling. This triangular phyllo version is most often filled with spinach, egg, and feta cheese. And burekas are one of my favorite foods to both eat and to prepare, because if burekas are on the menu, it's because I have at my disposal two of life's biggest luxuries, time and company. Because you see, burekas are a bit of an exercise in patience, as you discovered. Although the filling can come together really easily in seconds, the preparation of each pastry strip is, although it's a simple process, it requires you to attend to it with care. You need to first cut the dough to size, being careful not to tear it apart, lightly brush it with butter or olive oil, and it's almost certain it'll take a few tries for you to measure out the perfect amount of filling before you can proceed to the delicate act of folding. Finally, a simple egg or oil wash is required so that you can sprinkle your choice of sesame seeds, nigella seeds, za'atar, or in our case, sugar, and start all over again. Burekas are best suited to being made in batches of several dozens at a time for a crowd, or to keep in the freezer for a future occasion. They're always best made with a friend, friends, or a loved one, taking time to converse as you focus in on the mechanics of filling, folding, and brushing, letting yourself be guided to the soothing, mechanical, and almost magical rhythm of burekas. The care and the patience that's required to make burekas can barely be guessed in the photograph of Annie Conway. As it's often the case with ordinary people's stories, the information that's available to us in the available public records is limited. And in the work that I've done with Manchester Jewish Museum, I've always been fascinated by how, when we try to find out a little bit more about the people who make up the collection, we begin to actually see a much bigger picture. What the photo doesn't show is how the story of Annie and her burekas, which she holds in the photograph, is a story of finding how to belong in a changing community. Indeed, Annie Conway was in fact born Mary Ann Moore in 1907, and she became a convert to Judaism when she met and married waterproof garment maker Harry Cohen in 1936. The Cohens later changed their name to the anglicised Conway, and over the years, Annie becomes a key member of the congregation at the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue, which now houses the museum. As a talented embroiderer, she makes cushions for the synagogue, and she is responsible for upholstering the ark doors. This photograph is thought to have been taken in the 1960s, when the modest Jewish population of Cheetham Hill was dwindling, with many people relocating and attending shul in South Manchester instead. In this photograph, Annie's brekas are served during Hoshana Rabbah, the culmination of the harvest festival of Sukkot. Hoshana Rabbah is a joyous time of year, and it's a joyous time of praying for a healthy and prosperous new year. A simple parcel of, in our case, fruits and nuts. In Annie Conway's hands, the bereka is but a small clue of her dedication, the dedication that she brought to the community and to a community that she did not originally belong in. As an Irish woman, it is unlikely that she'd encountered many traditional Jewish foods before a marriage to Harry and her conversion. So please enjoy the berekas that you made in celebration of Annie Conway. And there's this red fruit coulis, which is a mix of berries, essentially.
She is obviously very dexterous if she was able to embroider and do these delicate sweetmeats as well.
It's quite funny, the two things are very connected, aren't they?
Very talented lady.
The silence of eating.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Come and sit down.
I find it very overwhelming. I wasn't raised Jewish. I find it, and food is really important to me. We already done this thing where I gave you what is my kugel, which I eat differently, and I do differently. And it's really overwhelming to me to think of the work and the assimilation and it's really joyful, but coming into the Jewish community from the outside has it involves a lot of heartbreak. It can be really harrowing, and you wonder if you're ever gonna belong. And it's I could almost cry thinking about the fact that Annie's not alive anymore. That she has no idea that we're here, and because you can be I'm very very involved in my synagogue organ and stuff. You can do that, and you still have this little part of you. And I just keep thinking what it would be like if she could see us in this museum, eating this food, and being it's for you. It's extremely overwhelming as a care, especially outside and telling herself we've had it properly.
And she's got a sense of humour in the photo.
Oh my god, I'm so into it. Just what it would mean to know that generations later, people were this incredible Jewish woman who gave a lot and is worth referencing.
I met her son who came to talk to me, and she put so much work into the synagogue that she sewed all these cushions, and I think that is part of, she really wanted to show that she was serious about being Jewish and that she was doing something useful for the community as well. And I hadn't seen her photograph at that point, but I really loved the photograph of her in her cardigan and her hat. She's,
Clearly she'd arrived, hasn't she?
We do a lot, I think. And I think people don't talk about it. Partly out of love and enjoying it, but
also kind of shows us that there's often, I guess in church as well, there's often an army of women that come in and do a lot of the sort of day-to-day. You can assume it's all flower arranging things, but it's the harder graft of cooking for after service.
And it's passing on culture and stuff. I think about my mother-in-law's no Jewish either. And I think about the things that she told me and taught me, and the way that my mother-in-law's great too, and it's passed on. It's not just there's lots of women that I always reference her really as this person very much passed on Jewish culture and religion, and even to me, despite not being Jewish and not converting, and like the sort of heroism is the wrong word, but like it's just like this food is this really powerful path through like pass on tradition, and we bring children and like the next generation into tradition, and it is so gendered or has been in the past. Yeah, I love it.
It's one of the few ways that women contribute, wasn't it, to the religious life? It's one of the few ways that women could contribute to the religious life. Obviously, having lots of children as well is important in the Jewish faith. But to be able to contribute to the life of the worship space in some way. Whether you think it's a natural instinct for women or that they were brought up to be very nurturing and things like that, but it's very humbling to know if Annie was looking down on us now. How would she think? Because it's about the food as well. It's about her story and the food that she prepared. And a lot of people I know, especially faith, where the hospitality is what's important, and making sure someone does not leave your house without being full to bursting.
Just a bit extreme in some Jewish homes.
I mean, I feel like that's more Jewish than like any amount of prayer.
I don't know. I don't
know
know.
in the Muslim community as well, if you go to.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's not the answer.
But I don't know if you've watched Father Ted. Well, the housekeeper in Father Ted was my Auntie Rosie.
Really?
Yeah. No, not really.
You have got to say that.
You never know.
But my Auntie Rosie lived in Dublin, my mum's sister. She would open the front door to somebody knocking on the door with, this is honest truth, a teapot in her hand. Oh, it's lovely to see you, just taking a cup of tea. But she wasn't. She wasn't. But she wanted to make them think, well, if she was, I'll have one. And then when you sat around her table, where there was too much tea, and have a bit of something, it was a full fish buffet or something, have a bit of something. And she would stand in the winter. I always remember, I lived in Cork, I was taken as a child to visit her, with her backside to the coal fire to keep her warm. And she would have the gâteau for the end of your eating on a plate with the server in her hand. Every time somebody's plate came empty from having a slice, whether they wanted it or not.
They had it.
Go on.
Go on. Yeah.
It was like they made the programme around her. It was so funny, but too much.
My father's a bit known for if you go to my parents live in Brighton, and if you knock on the door, he's known to be right by the door with a tray of gin and tonic. Before he even got through the door.
Very
And he's Catholic, he's not.
There's so much in that about our relationship to history as well, and what gets to be told as history. And to me, Annie and all the other women we spoke about today, that's the history I really care about.
It's a great reminder that it is still an important thing to pass on tradition and our family on to other generations, because I feel as my generation or people I'm surrounded with most of my time, if it's through work with students, university students, and being friends and being invited over and sharing, it's almost like you don't see it as much as what we are used to back at home in our families, in our countries. I think it's a very good reminder that we need to keep it up. And as a father now, and having that responsibility, that I'm not just sustaining my child with nutrients, to survive, but also history and memories and the way how our family is and how our, say, culture and nation, what's been important, what was this meal symbolizing for many people.
And it's done in such a light way.
Appreciate it later. Children.
The food that I associate with my family, I couldn't stand to eat. My family does like a braised sauerkraut. I just told you this the first time I ate sauerkraut. They do a braised sauerkraut. I couldn't stand it. My father always was like, take a little, you have to take a little every year at Thanksgiving. And now it's like, I can't imagine life without it. Like, it's the thing, it's the only food thing actually that I have from them.
And what's great about food as well is that it resists being too fixed. So not a single two of those burritos looked the same. And my recipe isn't Annie's. It's what can be guessed and what is the research, and the fruit was soaked in tea to call back to Ireland in some way. But that's all, it's all made up. And that's, so it's what I love about it is that it's not the kind of tradition where it's things must be done in this very specific way, or kind of there's this kind of lightness to it that actually, and you know, you have the recipes in your envelopes, and when you make it again, you might swap a different fruit, or Laura is making rice with the yogurt or whatever it might be, and this kind of the very the lightness of it.
Which is in fact how it all works.
Yes.
Even like, I mean, the thing with being like a Torah, like Talmud nerd, like that's how it all works. Because it's like a moment where you like see the actual truth, I guess. Like because food, everything is the stage, everything is shifting. Nothing is as we think we have received it, and like you know, nothing is me Sinai, nothing is from Sinai, nothing. Of course, it's not. And like, I think food is like. It shows us that, right? It's this illustration.
Yeah. It's kind of reassuring in some ways, isn't it? I think there's a actually you can't do it wrong, really.
Yeah. And
it just changes the shifts.
Yeah. That's the big thing. That's the fear. Like as somebody who came from the outside, and I see it all the time. The fear of doing it wrong
puts you off doing it.
And it's so huge. And it doesn't matter. You can be raised Jewish and still feel like you're going to do it wrong. And
yeah, my approach is you can't do it wrong, but you must do it with care.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Respect. Like you take it seriously. But like, yeah. My heart.
Today I've had the opportunity to invite people and to cook for people and to be around a table with people for the first time in quite some time. And I've been really moved with the generosity that people have brought to the table, the respect with which people express different opinions, and the fact that I've had the real privilege to share some food and some stories with people who are just as interested as I am to explore history in ways that go beyond words, in ways that engage all of our senses, and most importantly, in ways that are actually not that well recorded in the history books.
What we have found previously is that Eat the Archives has brought people together to have a much more nuanced understanding of each other's identities in a way that other styles of event don't, and part of that is sitting around a table and eating together in a relaxed way allows you to have a slightly more sometimes more difficult but certainly more nuanced conversation. So we found that people from different parts of the Jewish communities, for example, get to kind of understand each other a little bit better, and people from outside of the Jewish communities discover Jewish food and how fantastic it is, but also are able to share their own connections.
Everybody loves food, certainly everyone we know is a massive food lover. So to be able to build a group of people who are interested in exploring food culture has been really exciting, and that's been a big part of the work we've done with Leo. I think what works well is Leo's ability, his mixture of skills, the fact that he's a really talented theatre maker and a really skilled cook and chef as well, means that people can come to his events and they know the food is going to be amazing, but also it's elevated in some way. The element of storytelling, the fact that we bring stories from our collection to life through food is really exciting. And I think it's a shame that for the last year or so we haven't had the ability to bring people together to eat and cook together. And so for me, that's the exciting thing, is the museum seems to be opening at just the right time where we can actually start to get people together again, get people sat round a table gathered round kitchen equipment, making food together, eating food together, and kind of celebrating the diversity of cultures within our audiences through eating and cooking together. I think that's really exciting.
I just think it's great. It's really great putting food with objects in at the archive, because, it just gets people to think about themselves in relation to the objects and materials, and you get the taste of things, the smell of things, and just going into people's homes when you actually get to do that, that's going to be really exciting. I can really see how the project's going to resonate.
Thank you, everyone. So to conclude our time together as a little after dessert, as a little digestif, or whatever you might want to call it, I wanted to share with you a poem by a Native American writer called Joy Harjo. It's called Perhaps the World Ends Here. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table we gossip, recall enemies, and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor, falling down selves as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite.
Should we just have a round of applause, please?
And to you, thank you very much.